Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Matt, and I am from Mysterious Galaxy, and I have the pleasure of being joined by Ellen Datlow and Livia Llewellyn, who are going to be in conversation tonight about the new book, collection of short stories called Body Shocks: Extreme Tales of Body Horror, which is out. What day is today? That came out Tuesday, right? Or coming out?
Yes.
Yes, no, it came out Tuesday.
Yeah.
Wait, just 2 days
Yes.
ago?
Yes,
Or
it
like-
did come out today.
It came out while I was out of town. It actually came out when I was visiting my sister in Connecticut.
This
Like,
sucks. We don't know when it came out.
Right.
I'm on vacation today, and I have lost all concept of time. No idea what day of the week it is.
Mhm.
So that's always tough. But anyways, thank you so much for everyone for joining us. I'm just going to do a little quick review of Crowdcast for those of you who haven't joined us in the past on an event. So you see down below, right in the middle, it says signed and personalized book plates. That's the link that's going to take you to our website where you can buy the book, and you definitely should buy the book and read it, get it in time for Halloween reads, and you can sit out on your porch and read it to the kids as they come by. I'm sure this is very
Scare them.
appropriate. If you have anything to say, if you have anything to say, you can go ahead and chat with people in the chat to the right here. Not sure which way I'm pointing on. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to point
That way.
Backwards.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Go ahead and drop your comments in the chat. But if you have a question down below, you can open up the Ask a Question tab and drop it there. And Ellen and Livia will be taking those questions a little bit later on in the broadcast. So I think that is the end of my Vanna White spiel. So I will get out of the way and let you two talk about all the body horror things.
Okay. Well, I assume everybody knows about the book, or they wouldn't be here, or at least they know about us. My first question is for Livia. A lot of
we
your
have
work.
to ask each other questions because I don't have any
Like,
questions.
it's all right. We'll just talk about stuff, talk
Okay.
about stuff. But
Okay.
the first question is, what attracted you? I mean, I know why I did the anthology, and we can talk about that after. But a lot of your work is body horror, and did you ever think of it as you've written it? Did you think that's what it was, or did you even realize or care that's what it was? And
Well,
why do you write that about that?
I never thought of it as body horror because it was for a couple of reasons. First, and I've said this before, when you're a woman, you're dealing with a lot of body issues that men don't necessarily deal with. If you're a person who menstruates, a person who gives birth, you're and just in general, being someone who grows older, and every human being grows older, and every person has their own. I don't know, body horror is exactly the right phrase to say, but everyone has their own issues, and that can become body horror if you're creating art, whether it's visual art or writing. And so for me, it just seemed to be just a part of being a human being is having these issues and fascinations with things that can happen to the body, Stand By Me is about a dead body and the fascination that comes from looking at a dead body, and I think everyone has that kind of fascination to a certain degree with what happens to your body, at any point in your life. So I never thought of it as body horror, but then I think about this every now and then. About 5 or 6 years ago, someone sent a tweet to Stephen King on Twitter saying, just addressed to him saying, hey, Stephen King, you really need to check out the writer Livia Llewellyn. She's absolutely phenomenal. She's like an amazing writer of body horror. And I was just like, oh my God, why would you say that? That's horrible. That's the worst possible thing. I didn't respond to it in any way whatsoever, because they were complimenting me. You know, they were saying, hey, look at this writer. She's really awesome, to Stephen King. And all I could do was go, I don't write body horror. God damn it. But then
did he respond? Did he respond?
No, of course he didn't. He probably gets 10,000 tweets like that a day saying, hey, check out, you know, so-and-so.
Yeah.
You know, he has no idea who I am, and he never will. But that's fine, because it actually got me thinking, you know, why would someone say that I wrote body horror? And it took me a while to realize that, yes, I do. Like 90% of the stories I write have some form of body horror in it, in them.
That's why I thought of you immediately as far as reprints, you know.
Yeah. And actually, even though what you reprinted wasn't really even the most extreme body horror I've written, but and when you picked it, I was like, is that? And then I'm like, yeah, it is, actually. It is, because that, I don't want to spoil the story, even though it's a reprint. But for those who haven't read it, it does deal with a trope in horror that really is about body horror. It's not. It's a trope that's usually associated with political or issues or society or the end of the world or whatever. But no, it's also about your body. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I never thought much about body horror before Jacob and I talked about an anthology idea. And I swear it had to have been Jacob who came up with, because I can't imagine that I would. Because I just never thought
that doesn't myself. Seem like a you kind of
subject seem like my
reason.
But when we talked about it, and I realized that I have published a lot of body horror, and I'm aware of it, you know, either as reprints or as original stories, and that I don't say it's certainly not the preponderance of what I've acquired and published over the years, but you know, at least a bunch of that, a handful of the stories that I knew from either publishing or I was aware of them and they stuck with me, and they were definitely body horror. So that was interesting, and writing and just putting together the book taught me a lot, because I had to look up, well, what does it mean? How do people define it? And I didn't realize, I guess it is another subgenre of horror, which I hadn't, people say, well, what's horror and what things are horror? And I'll go into, SF horror, supernatural, blah, blah, blah. But I never mentioned body horror because it didn't even occur to me until recently in doing this book and putting together the anthology, the introduction. And what I learned from it is that there's a great variety. There's such a great variety out there of what I consider body horror, and I was, so you haven't read the book, right, Livia?
No, because I haven't received
it. This happened the other day that, it's like, I can't talk to my writers that haven't read the book.
I was just thinking, we can't even have a discussion about, well, what story did you like best? Or what did you think about this one?
Well, I can send you a PDF file, but it's too late now.
I mean, do I even have a table of contents? I don't know. All I have is
I posted it. I posted the table.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. But that's not going to help me. It's not going to help me discuss the stories.
Read some of the stories. A few of the stories I published, at least one or two I published on Tor.com. I think
I'm sure I have.
The Valentine's story, La Beauté Sans Vertu, I believe that was on Tor.com.
Oh yeah, it was. Unfortunately, I read so many things, and it's very rare that I remember something. It's like I only have room in my head for like 5 stories from other people, and then everything else is like my shit.
Well, don't forget, because I read for the best of the year, I have to. I've been reading many, many, many stories over 30 years, and the thing is, when I do remember them, when people say, "What are your favorite stories?" I'll say, "Well, the ones I reprint over and over because I actually remember them." You know?
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. I've started compiling a small list of stories. I was going to do this years ago for someone who asked, and I don't even remember. It's so embarrassing. I wanted to have like a primer, like a Livia Llewellyn primer of what are the stories that were that have been so influential to me over the years.
That would be fascinating. Do it. Put it together.
And just like this is the story, and then this is why this story means so much to me. This is, and those are really the only stories I remember, because I read them over and over again. Like, I mean, right. Laird Barron's Imago sequence is like at the top, of the list, because I've read it so many times. So,
I mean, I'm so like bad at analyzing why I like things. If someone said, what about this story makes you love it so much? Why do you and I don't think I'd have an answer. I'm not critical in that way. I just know that there are things about, if I start not being a writer, I don't know how to writer talk. So I don't know. No, really, I don't know the elements, I know in my brain, I know emotionally and subjectively what kind of story, why I love it.
It's like the old porn thing. I don't know what it is. When I see it, I know it, or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. But it would be very hard for me. I'd make a terrible academic.
But actually, that's kind of a good thing, because none of your anthologies, all of them are so different in so many ways. And I don't feel like you ever repeat yourself.
Thank goodness.
Like
I'd be bored.
Whatever like invisible, mysterious thing attracts you to stories. It's a vast ocean of mysteriousness. Fortunately, because you keep coming up with all of these different kinds of anthologies.
Yeah. Well, sometimes at a certain point, I'm out of ideas, but it's a very short time. But it's also I have ideas, but can I sell them? That's the other part.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've managed to do several Lovecraftian anthologies, and I think they're all different. I mean, some of them are reprint, at least one, Lovecraft's Monsters. I think did I do 2 or 3 originals? Lovecraft Unbound, Lovecraft's Children, or Children of Lovecraft. Maybe I did 2 of those and 1 reprint.
I was in one of those.
Huh? You were in all, weren't you?
I was in one. I don't remember.
Yeah, I remember it was a really weird. It was an original. It must have been Lovecraft's Children.
Yeah, it was.
Lovecraft, because it was a really, really weird story.
Oh, was that
that weird structure thing, and it was science fiction, right?
Yes, that was Bright Crown of Joy.
Yeah,
about the woman who's seeing the event in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, right. So yeah.
Which turns into a body horror story.
Well, that's why. I mean, that story reminds me of the story you wrote for the Monster anthology that we just finished, and a little bit in the structure or something. That the weird structure.
Oh yeah. The weird time shifts. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what the hell we're talking about, so we probably should cut.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was going to ask you, because you said something about not having done anything with body horror before, but I wanted to ask you about your fascination with dolls, and with especially weird dolls, doll shapes, dolls with needles and pins sticking out of their heads, and dolls like the doll on the spider legs. I mean, isn't that a form of body horror? Because dolls are kind of like
that's a whole other thing. The uncanny valley.
Oh yeah, that's a miniature form. Dolls are kind of, a miniature form of humans, and so isn't that a form of body horror? Would you think?
And in fact, I have. K.W. Jeter and I bought a bunch of books. He might have introduced me to katana dolls. This photographer photographs dolls, mechanical dolls that look like children. I mean, and in weird positions. I have it probably someplace on my bookshelf that I'm not going to grab. Maybe not safe for children, but it's amazingly grotesque and weird and fascinating. You know, I actually prefer doll parts, I think, and doll heads to the whole body. I mean,
Yeah,
I was collecting three-faced dolls. I have every three-faced, three-headed doll you can do. You know, you move the top part, and it's crying, laughing, and sleeping.
Oh, it switches. Yeah,
and I love those. But I got everything on. I went on eBay and got everything that existed, and then I finally stopped buying dolls. I used to do this on eBay. I bought everything of one thing. I'm a real collector. I'm a nutty collector. I mean, so I was collecting dolls. And the last doll I collected from eBay, I didn't realize it. I didn't read the instructions. It was like 5 feet tall. And it's like, what the hell is this? What did I order? And it was disgustingly hideous. And I didn't want it. I don't know what I did with her.
I'm so sad you don't have it.
And another.
I'm a little relieved.
Huh? What?
You should have just like sent it to someone. Oh my God. Yeah. Have you heard this story? I'll just say this because it's about a weird doll. It has to do with body horror. When I worked at Tor, I found out that there was this person who used to submit. They had this science fiction book manuscript that they submitted to all of the science fiction publishers, and it just made the rounds around and around, and it always came with this weird doll like in tin foil, and it was like all the weird.
I wish they had submitted them to me. Were they interesting dolls at least?
What was this?
Were they at least interesting dolls?
No, it was like horrifying. Like the editors were like traumatized, and I guess someone lost the doll, and the guy just like went insane. And I don't know what happened, but
he never bothered them again.
Yeah, and I guess everyone went into hiding, and that was the end.
Right. Well, I just want to segue into one other eBay mistake. It's not doll. It's body horror, but not of a human. I got an armadillo. I wanted an armadillo purse or something. No, it was an armadillo. Oh, it was an armadillo with a bottle of beer in its mouth. Empty. I swear to God. Well, I got it, and it turns out it still had its hair sticking out, and it was so I pulled it out of the box and I put it back in the box, and I said, I'm never looking at that again. And I'm friends with Michaela Rosner and her late husband, Richard Herman. Richard is a sculptor. You've seen some of his work in my apartment, the dogs that are hanging with 3 heads and stuff. Anyway, yeah. Sculptor. So I thought he might like it. I said, I will send this to you. You can have it, but it cannot be in the room that I sleep in when I visit. So I sent it to them. I don't know where it is now. I mean, he died, and I don't know what she gave away. But anyway, yes, that was another eBay mistake. That is body horror for the armadillo. You know, can you imagine being a stuffed armadillo and being sold with an empty beer bottle, like Lone Star beer in your mouth?
Well, that makes perfect sense. A Lone Star. Oh,
and that's what happens when you don't read the descriptions well enough or carefully enough on eBay.
Yeah, I've just occasionally gotten like a really like banged up tin, thinking it was something pretty, and it wasn't. I've never bought a stuffed animal, so.
And that was the only one I bought, and never again.
Lesson learned.
Yep. So, okay, what else about body horror?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's fun. It's really disturbing. Not all the stories are as disturbing as others. There are a few very disturbing stories that are really grisly. Not all body horror has to be grisly, but and I guess that's where it overlaps with splatterpunk, which I never was an aficionado of. See, that's why I think I wasn't interested in body horror, because to me it seemed to refer to grisly, violent violation of women. That's how it was. I perceived it for a long time. Okay. So it wasn't until I started doing this book. That's why initially when I think Jacob mentioned it, I was like, I don't know. Do I really body horror? Really? But then when I started thinking about it, it's like, yeah, yes, there's grisliness and there's provocativeness and offensiveness in some of the stories. Well, one person's offense is another's celebration, like Michael Blumlein's tissue ablation, which is
Oh yeah,
that was the first story he ever sold. It was sold to Interzone, and it's I never remember the full title. Hold on, I will tell you. It's where is it? Tissue ablation and variant regeneration, a case report. And he wrote it in the dead heat of the Reagan administration. He was extremely angry at Reagan. He's a doctor. So let's just say it's a vivisection and reusing parts for good things. So, it was a very angry story. And I'm pleased that I was able to acquire it for the anthology before he died. He died of cancer a few months after I actually acquired the story. He was sick for a long time. But I was really glad to acquire that story for the book, and then he knew it was going to be in the book.
When you were putting all of the stories in order, I know that there's like a flow to how stories should be. You don't sort of. I mean, how
card pickup, honey. In the middle. I mean, most of it.
I mean, did you go, okay, there's a lot of blood in these stories, so I'm going to separate them, and there's like too many, there's like a X amount of stories with like chopped up parts or whatever. Did you space them out that way, or did you put them together like with emotional, like using emotional beats, like I'm just curious.
I put it together the way I do any anthology. I try to, it is somewhat random, but not. I mean, I try to figure out what seems to go well and has a different point of view, different voice. I try not to put things that are about the same theme together, unless sometimes I might want to put them together if they're very different. It depends. I might want to do it. I definitely try to vary the word lengths. And the story I chose for the first story, someone said they read the story and it didn't seem like horror at first, but by the end it definitely was. And I realized, oh yeah, that's why I put it first, because I wanted people to figure out, to see, this is what the book's about. It's not going to be immediately in your face. It's going to be a story. It starts here, it goes here, and then the horror progresses and becomes more emphatic. By the end, it's all over the place. And that's how I pick a first story anyway. I mean, for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, not as a horror thing, but as something that you want to draw the reader in. You want to always, you never want something too complicated and too complex and too weird to start, because you will lose a lot of readers that way. I mean, so to me, it's important to start with a story that is straightforward, basically, that is a straightforward plot. And then other things are more random, in its length and a bunch of other things. And sometimes I make a mistake. When I was putting together the monster anthology, Screams for the Dark, I had my table of contents mentioned, and then I suddenly, as I was putting the whole manuscript together, I put all the stories in one file. As I was doing that, I looked at the end. I realized that the endings of two of the stories had similar endings, kind of, and enough that I didn't want to put them next to each other. So I had to change. So I had to move something. Yeah, I moved things around, and at the last minute. Oh, and I'm going over the copy edit right now of the book of the monster anthology. I wanted it to be called the Nightfire Book of Monsters, but they didn't go for that. So that's the one, Screams from the Dark, and it's 29 stories of monsters and the monstrous, something like that. And going over the copy edit, I put, there are stories I mixed up anyway, and I don't think there was a story. It might have been the stories that I meant that I moved around, but I didn't change the table of contents in the copyright page. So thank God someone caught that. It's like, oh, and I was missing a bio from John Langan. And I'm glad someone put that, because he was late. John's always long.
Because he's always late. He's always late.
And he's usually long. Although for the Jackson anthology, he wrote a really short story. It's like 1,500 words, I think. The short.
It's because he was busy writing the novella for Screams from the Dark.
Okay, probably. Yes, but he said he forgot to send me a bio, and I forgot to ask him. So I'm glad someone caught that. Yes. So, are there any questions? Oh, there are questions. We should see what people are asking. Hold on. Do they go in order from the top to the bottom? I want to go from the bottom to. Which way should we do it? Which came first? Do we have any idea what order they came in? Can anyone tell?
I would say just start. Can you just start at the top and just work our way down?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Okay, Ellen, you've just published an extreme body horror anthology and a Shirley Jackson themed anthology. Can you talk about the different mental spaces you go to when editing collections with themes that are such polar opposites? Well, I don't usually edit them at the same time. I have tried very hard to stagger anthologies and have them do at different times of the year, but invariably they're always somehow come due around the same time. So really, but the thing is, the Body Shocks, of course, was a reprint, so it was a different process. I mean, I'm not sure my mental process was different, but it was a different process looking, figuring out what reprints I wanted. And with the Jackson book, that was all original. So over time, the stories come in. And in fact, I love working on two diametrically opposed things at the same time, because then I can take a break. My brain can work on something else. So I like working on different projects at different times. It didn't affect me in any weird way working on body horror. I don't think. Here's someone similar. Ellen, do you ever stop reading a body horror story because it's just too unsettling? Well, yeah, probably ones. Well, not the ones I took. As far as movies, that's different. I mean, I've told this story that I saw the Thing by John Carpenter in a preview in New York in a screening room, and I loved it, but I've never been able to watch it again. I found it so horrific and so much the body horror. It hit all the wrong buttons for me, or the right buttons, depending on your point of view. And so I've never been able to watch it again, and I'd like to. I really want to, but I don't know if I could stand it. So it's, so in that sense, more movies than stories. Livia, do you see your question? Do you want to read it?
Oh, sure. Livia, how do you approach writing horror in short form? It always impresses me when people can write genre short stories and can establish the world and atmosphere in an economy of words. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you how I write them. I don't know even why I write them. I wanted to be an actress. And I trained. And for 20 years, I was a classically trained Shakespearean actress, very unsuccessful. You never heard of me. But I was in like 100 plays. And I don't know, and then I wasn't getting anywhere. It was because I was unsuccessful and that I just kind of gravitated to another art form. And I don't know why horror. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I don't know. I think there's just a richness about the genre. It allows me to express my emotions and express the emotions of the character in a way that's gothic and operatic and over the top, and yet at the same time I can be very subtle and emotional and I wouldn't say that I do it with an economy of words. I mean, sometimes I do, but most of the time, sometimes my writing
is compared to novellas and novels usually.
Oh, well, yeah. I actually, honestly, when I write longer, I still have not gotten still have not successfully gotten to that point where I've been able to write a longer project without it falling apart a little bit. That's something I just keep working on. I could do novellas very well. Short novellas, like 25,000 words. I'm working on a longer one now that I'm hoping will be around 37,000 words. I do think, I know Ellen has said this, and other people too, that it's really difficult to sustain that tension and that level of horror in a longer form, and you have to learn to kind of dip in and out of it when you're writing a 70,000 word novel.
Well, I would say don't do it, but economically you kind of have to. But otherwise, I mean, I think people shouldn't. No, seriously, I don't think people should be forced to write short stories. I don't think people should be forced to write novels if that's not what they want to write. But economically, practically, yes, you have to write novels.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, unless you're someone who's like considered like a genius, I mean, I know Kelly Link just turned in her novel manuscript, but if she had only ever written short stories, no one would be complaining. I mean,
except her agent.
Yeah, that's true. Promised to write one. That's why I've never promised to write one. I just write one, and then I'm like, here, look. Yeah, no, I think I do agree that you should write what you want and what makes you happy. But I actually do want to someday successfully write a novel, and it's not something I'm going to give up on. And I have like a little list of things that, subjects, plots that I want to turn into novels. But it's never been easy for me because it just seems like when I go past 10,000 words, I can start feeling it kind of go a little bit sideways, and watch, that's going to be the screen grab for, for any advertising for this. So it's very difficult for me to, unless it's an extremely simplified plot. And sometimes I don't want to do that. Sometimes I want to do something more complex. So, I mean, I'm spending a long time answering this question. And I guess the short answer is really, I don't know how I do it. And I'm constantly changing my style too. And that was a terrible answer.
No, that was all right. That was fine.
Like my novels, it fell apart at the end.
No, hey, that's how my introductions are. That's why I start writing introductions. I'll write down thoughts and ideas, and then suddenly it's like, blah, I don't know how to end this. And I send it to Stefan Jimenowitz. Help.
I don't understand
how finish it.
Sometimes I'm watching these authors like do these events like this, and they're just like talking and everything sounds so wonderful, and it's like a little mini TED talk, and I'm just like I don't know, I'm good with words. I don't.
Okay. Do you consider stories so hostile that feature torture, plucking out eyeballs, flaying a shutter, to be body horror? Is that in or out of the subgenre? It is body horror, and I hate it.
See,
that's why I always hated body horror, because I thought that was what it was.
I don't really consider stuff like that body horror. I think, I mean, that's torture porn.
But torture porn is actually a body horror.
I guess it is, but I feel like there's certain. How do I say this? I think that body horror also encompasses things. For me, body horror is something a little bit more subtle. It can still be gross in an over the top way. You like The Fly. I mean, that was so disgusting.
Yes.
So disgusting. But I wouldn't call that torture porn. I feel like torture
porn. It wasn't exploitative. It wasn't exploitative. That's the right word.
Yeah. That's it. I feel like torture porn is I mean, there are some torture porn films that maybe are a bit better than others. I mean, the first Saw was interesting.
Honestly, I haven't watched any of them, so I don't know.
I mean, I honestly can't tell you if The Human Centipede was any good or had anything to say, because I will never fucking watch that. I just can't do it. I can't.
Sounds hysterically funny, I have to say.
It does, actually.
But I don't want to watch it.
I'm sorry. I see enough poo on the sidewalks of New York City. I don't need that in 2 hours of a movie.
Livia, here's another question for you connected to what you've been talking about. Livia, you mentioned the connection between women's lives and body horror. Do you think we'll see more body horror in writing and films because of the loss of access to women's health, along with the heightened attention to the body thanks to the pandemic? That's interesting.
I don't. I mean, I think there's some films that are already addressing that, but not in a body horror way, more in a dramatic way.
Dystopic. More.
Yeah, or dystopian. I mean, I don't think Children of Men really would qualify as body horror, but
No.
except that what happened to the woman who turned out to be pregnant was horrible, but it wasn't her story. It was a story about the protagonist was male. And there may be more stories like The Handmaid's Tale, where it's centered around the women and their reproductive rights. But I also feel like this has been happening for a while, and I think it's only recently that people have realized that Roe versus Wade really is in trouble in a way that it's never been before, and rights are being taken away in a way that they never have before. And it happened all throughout the Trump administration, and it was slowly happening before then too. But with the new laws in Texas, I think it's almost too soon. I think maybe in a year, maybe you'll see some maybe movie projects or TV or short fiction. People who write short fiction can respond quicker, I think. And of course, people who blog and who write articles can respond even quicker.
Well, it's interesting. I'm sorry, when I was in Jungian therapy in the late 70s for like 3 years.
Wow.
I loved it. It was great because it was just fun.
All about dreams.
Yes. Oh, yes. It was.
Yeah.
And I had a dream diary. But I don't remember what was going on as far as reproductive rights, but I remember talking to my therapist, who is a woman, and saying I was really, really worried that abortion rights were going to be taken away, which means something was going on then. There was a threat even back then. And although Roe Wade was around, but so
yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember what prompted my fear. And she said, basically, I'm not sure I realized what she was saying at the time, but basically she was saying middle-class women don't have to worry. You'll never have to worry about it because basically we can afford to go someplace and have it done if we needed to. I mean, I think that's what she was saying to me. She said, no, you don't worry. Or I don't think she was saying it's never going to happen.
Yeah. Or she was saying that you would, as a middle-class woman, you would have access to
that's the way
birth control choices that lower class.
I'm only looking back now and saying I'm not. I think that's what she meant because at the time, it's not like I was pregnant or anything, but I was just nervous,
Yeah.
And she was an older woman. She was French. Geneviève Geer. She was great. I adored her.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I think I do think that there will be like an artistic response to what's happening, but I think you're not going to see it right away because people need time to get over the trauma, the immediate trauma of their lives being fucked up, and then responding that through whatever medium they use.
It
Let's
has been
see.
wonderful listening to you for both. What books would you recommend to someone who is just getting into modern horror literature, any subgenre? I would say anthologies. I mean, to get a feel for what's out there, who the writers are. I mean, I'm going to be self-serving, but not only my best of the year. I mean, I've been doing a best of the year in horror, since 1986. It used to be best fantasy and horror, and I did the horror. So you can see the pulse of the horror industry and horror writing and how it's changed, over the last 30 years. And then, of course, it's Paula Garan and Steve Jones from England, and they have different points of view too. And Carl Edward Wagner's old books of the best horror. So I would actually suggest, if you want to find new writers and figure out what's out there and who you like, read anthologies.
I just recommended a couple days ago, someone was asking me, what's new in horror and what would I like? And I was like, well, it's like with an anthology, you've got like a big box of candy with a variety of things, and you'll find out very quickly, which writers you like, and then you can seek out their collections and their novels or whatever. But start with the anthologies, definitely. The best ofs, and Ellen has so many themed anthologies. Any of them would be a great start.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been science fiction, fantasy, and horror.
Yeah, and the smaller presses like Word Horde and Undertow,
Tachyon.
Yeah, for gay and lesbian, there's Lethe Press, who published my first collection, and just once you start there,
you can branch out.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many writers now. I just and I know it's a lot of it has to do with social media, and like 10 or 15 years ago, I didn't even know who was writing horror, because I was on LiveJournal and MySpace.
I was on LiveJournal for a short time.
But
MySpace was before my time as far as knowledgeable about social media.
MySpace, I was only on it because I heard about it, and people were like, "Oh yeah, you should go on MySpace." Then I went on MySpace, and I'm like, I need a band. Why am I on MySpace? But I met Graham Joyce on MySpace, and
Graham was a really good writer. He was a lovely
writer and a lovely guy, and I was so excited. And I messaged him on MySpace saying, "You are one of my favorite writers. Your novels are just phenomenal." And he was like so excited. He was like, "Oh my God, I've got a fan." It was like when everyone was still trying to figure out all of this social media, and he was like, "Oh my God, yay!"
Here's a question. You can take it first.
Oh. What drew both of you initially to horror? Was there a particular piece of writing or movie you recall? Wow. I mean, I had I grew up in a home with two teachers, had so many books. A lot of them were horror anthologies. Like a lot of them were like Playboy horror anthologies, and I have one of those little short story, tiny little paperback, the
Playboy Book of Terror and the Supernatural.
Yes,
I still have my dog-eared copy, but I found a hardcover copy too in honor.
That
changed my life.
Yeah, and I watched. My parents were the same with television. As long as it didn't have sex in it, I could watch it. So that, and no adult humor like Archie Bunker, so they had, the matinees on TV. So, Saturday morning I watched Scooby-Doo, and that was kind of scary. But then in the afternoon, there'd be.
You're joking, right? I've never seen Scooby-Doo, but you're joking, yes?
I was a kid. Shut up.
I don't know. I never watched Scooby-Doo. It's after my time.
but actually, but it was spooky. It wasn't like scary, but it was spooky. And then there's the Munsters and the Addams Family, and then
Twilight Zone, Night Gallery.
And then there were all the Vincent Price movies, the horror matinees on the local channels, and all the Poe movies, and the Gorgon and the Roger Corman films, and so I was just kind of surrounded by all of it, and I don't know, I loved the aesthetic of it. And that's what attracted me. And my mother was an elementary school teacher in the 50s and 60s.
Mine was too.
And she still has all of the original, these 50s and 60s Halloween decorations. And so starting October 1st, my sister and I would decorate the entire house. It was like Halloween, like for 31 days. And so I loved that aspect of horror, the kind of pop culture and like I said, the aesthetic of it. And it wasn't until later, when I became a teenager and I hated the world and I got into punk, and I think then I started seeking out a different kind of horror. And I did read a lot of Stephen King, but he didn't really do it for me the way Clyde Barker did. When I read Clyde Barker, that's kind of when my world changed. And then I got into like the French decadence and some really fucked up writing, spanning 2 centuries. I just went all over the place and realized there was a lot more out there. That was the kind of horror that really spoke to me, and watching different kinds of movies, I'm trying to think. I mean, a lot of the movies from the 70s were really, they're classics now, but they weren't really nuanced in terms of horror. But there was a lot of films that and literary novels that really influenced me. A lot of poetry, so yeah.
I mean, I grew up reading everything, all kinds of stuff. My parents had books all the time, all over the place. My father owned a luncheonette. He did not have science fiction books. Now, most people found their science fiction books in luncheonettes, candy stores. My dad didn't have those. He had Lancer paperbacks, which were basically men's adventure, but he had comic books. He had dirty books too, but I read every comic book in the store, but I was not allowed to take it home. So I read everything from Archie and Veronica and all the superheroes to the icky horror things, whatever they were called, with the ghoulish thick covers, those.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, I read everything. And my parents had a lot of books at home. I'm not sure how they chose the books because they had so many. I think they bought a lot of Modern Library, the little hardcover books. I mean, I read Nathaniel Hawthorne's collection, the stories, Guy de Maupassant, Bullfinch's Mythology. I read Iliad and Odyssey. I hated the Iliad, but I loved the Odyssey. The Iliad was boring. The Odyssey was great.
No, the Iliad is amazing. It's so gossipy.
No, the Odyssey had all the monsters.
Now I know the Odyssey. Yeah,
the Iliad.
It depends on the translation. You have to get the right translation.
Well, I'm sure I had the wrong one.
I think you did.
Probably. But, and I was watching. I mean, my parents. My mom would tell me the story of the Twilight Zone. It was on too late, the original Twilight Zone. It was on like 10 o'clock at night. And my sister and I our bedroom doorway had a perfect view to the parents' television in the corner, on the far corner of the room. So we'd watch until they told us, stop, get back to bed. And we did this every night, or almost every night. But anyway, the next morning, my mom would tell me the story of the Twilight Zone. She would tell me the whole plot, because if I didn't watch it. And so I grew up on the Twilight Zone, and the other one, Night Gallery, One Step Beyond. and all these wonderful TV shows that were not always horror, but grotesque and weird. And at a certain point, I started reading Lovecraft, his short fiction. I don't remember when, in Bradbury, Ellison.
Oh yeah, it's
Lovecraft.
funny because I do remember coming across Lovecraft in my high school library, and I was more excited about the covers because it was like one guy had his eyes coming out, and it was like this really classic. the faces. I have those paperbacks.
I kept a bunch.
Each one had like a weird face on it, and that didn't really. I don't know. I didn't really get into Lovecraft until later when I started reading what other people were doing with Lovecraft. And then
the early ones, you mean, not the current ones. You mean the early ones, like the people who are the Lovecraft Circle, right? I mean, Chambers and all those people. I mean, I read a bunch of those people. I liked reading that. I read a lot of pastiches until I realized I was sick of pastiches.
Yeah, no, I read them, but I wasn't really into them. It wasn't, I got more excited with Lovecraft and with his circle when I started reading other authors who were taking those ideas and doing their own King in Yellow or their own Cthulhu.
Like who? I mean, what decade you're talking about?
Well, no, that was just recently.
Oh, right. Okay, sure.
Yeah, no, it was really.
Right. Well, that's much more.
I read Lovecraft in high school, and then I was like, and I forgot about him for like decades.
Well, right. I remember the purple prose, and also the thing about Lovecraft. I mean, between Lovecraft and Bradbury, and some of his stuff wasn't really science fiction, but I didn't care.
I love Ray Bradbury. I love his stuff.
But to me, I mean, okay, it made me realize at a young age the difference between science fiction and horror. Or at least Lovecraft and science fiction. Science fiction was a sense of wonder, and horror or Lovecraft was a sense of terror at the unknown. The cosmos, was out to get you. And I didn't put it in words, but I had it in my, I knew that.
Yeah.
And and then I started reading more weird stuff. I mean, I got into John Fowles, the Magus. I adored the Magus, and Steppenwolf by Herman Hesse. I liked stories with transformation and weirdness. And even though I even loved The Centaur by John Updike, because I can imagine my own brain. We had an 8th grade teacher who gave us all these, probably the hottest writers from Newsweek, a whole bunch of these people, and 8th grade, which was great, was 7th grade. And I read John Updike's The Centaur, and I took it as a literal centaur because otherwise it's too boring. I mean, I'm sure it was totally metaphorical, but to me it's like, oh, it's really got a centaur. How wonderful. Yeah. And then I read not horror, but Henry Miller. Oh, I got into the Marquis de Sade in college. It's boring. But I mean, Philosophy of the Bedroom, 101 Days of Sodom. It's like after 20, I was bored.
That's so funny because I tried reading him. You'd think I'd be like totally.
No, he's boring.
I couldn't do it. I liked Anais Nin, Delta of Venus and Little Birds and her diaries.
I didn't read that till much later. And once I learned about feminism in the early 70s, that was when I got into that.
I read those in high school. My uncle had this huge library, and he had the naughty books, and that my parents didn't want me to read, and I would go over to his house, and he'd be like, "Read whatever you want," and I'd be like, "I want that one." Yeah. So and the beats, all of the beat poets and the beat writers.
I read those later. I mean, I'm quite a bit older than you are, so different generations, almost. But But I loved not only horror but everything. But I mean, I've never had horror. But it was the Playboy Book of Terror and the Supernatural. It had Mr. Sardonicus in it. It had Owen Wilson. It had all these great writers some of whom I actually met, decades later, like Gay and Wilson, and became friends with. And it was fabulous. Ray Russell, just a whole bunch of really great stories. So that was the first, that and Harlan Ellison and Dangerous Visions. And Dangerous Visions and again Dangerous Visions made me who I am. as an editor. I mean, Harlan as an editor, it did influence me.
Mm-hmm.
But then I read, someone mentioned Clyde Barker. Clyde Barker, when I remember, I mean, I was in publishing for quite a while. I mean, when Clive came around, and I remember, I guess Steve Jones probably started introducing him and his work. I think I published the first American publication of one of his stories in OMNI. Two of his stories we published in OMNI, Books of Blood and one of the others. And from number 6, from the second batch. And Clive's work was amazing. I mean, it was it still is. I mean, I haven't read most of it for a long time, but I've always thought his short stories some of them brilliant. You know,
Oh, yeah.
But then, I mean, I was already fully formed, editor and horror by then, but still, yeah. So, but when people say, "Well, why do you love horror?" I don't know. I mean, I don't know why I love horror, and it doesn't scare me. It doesn't scare me at all. It creeps me out. It makes me feel uncomfortable and unnerved, but it doesn't scare me.
What you said about science fiction being about wonder and horror being about terror, what I love about horror is finding the wonder in the terror. I like kind of mashing them together. And I like finding authors who can do that, like Laird, and Caitlin Kiernan and John and Nathan, who can create these terrifying visions, but also create protagonists who see things that are happening to them with a sense of wondrousness, and that's what I love. So
yeah, definitely. Oops, look who's here. Hi, Matt.
I hate to come back in and interrupt. I apologize. We have one last quick question, which is your favorite erotic horror authors? Just any quick suggestions?
No,
I don't like erotic horror very often. Well, I guess Livia. I mean, she writes. I don't know if it's erotic, but sexual horror. I mean, I did a whole anthology of that. Little Deaths was sexual horror anthology.
You have to do another, so I can write something for you. I mean, I would. Caitlin Kiernan is really.
Yeah, I would have to say individual stories rather than one writer, than a writer.
Yeah.
I mean, so many of the writers write different things. So yes, some of Kate's work, definitely. Some of your work. I mean, Lucy Taylor sometimes, it depends on individual stories, I find. It's hard for me to say overall, that person writes this all the time, because they don't.
Oh, and if people are really interested in erotic horror short stories, Poppy Bright's, Billy Martin, but Poppy Bright's Love in Vain, two anthologies, 1 and 2. I picked those up a long time ago, and that was what kind of spurred my interest in. I didn't realize you could combine erotica and horror, and then after that I found Caitlin Kieran, and I was like, okay, this is it. So yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Well, thank you so much for the recommendations and for the great conversation and taking all of our questions. If you haven't already, this should have convinced you to go out there and buy Body Shocks, because anthologies and short story anthologies in particular are some of the greatest treasures you can find in a bookstore. And you can find it at Mysterious Galaxy right now and get signed and personalized book plates. So we really appreciate Ellen and Livia for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And for everyone who watched. Yeah,
thank you, people.
Thank you.
All right. Well, everybody have a great night and enjoy the rest of spooky season.
Sounds good. Okay.
All right. Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.